The wedding was the kind of spectacle that made headlines across Nigeria and beyond. Held at a private beachside villa in Victoria Island, Lagos, the affair was drenched in elegance and excess. Zoey Obika could still remember the soft breeze against her skin, the delicate scent of white orchids that lined the aisle, and the way Khalid Danjuma looked at her like she was the only woman in the world. He had spared no expense. International designers crafted her gown, a dazzling creation of lace and diamonds that shimmered like the ocean under moonlight. A string quartet played as she walked barefoot down the flower-strewn aisle, escorted by her father, who had tears in his eyes. Khalid's tuxedo was sharp, custom-made, and his smile never wavered. His vows weren't just romantic, they were worshipful. Every word spoke of forever. Every gaze promised safety, devotion, and admiration. The world watched. So did her friends, her former classmates, and the many women who had once teased her for being just a quiet girl from Surulere. Now she was married to Nigeria's most desired billionaire. The man who owned skyscrapers and oil blocks had chosen her, Zoey, and he made sure the world never forgot it. On their honeymoon in Seychelles, paparazzi captured photos of Khalid kissing her feet on the beach, feeding her coconut water, and carrying her in his arms through the shallow waters like she was made of crystal. He'd arranged for a private island, a chef who only cooked her favorites, and a candlelit setup each night under the stars. "You deserve to be adored," he often whispered, "and I'll spend my last breath doing just that." The photos went viral. So did their anniversary celebrations, which were never small. On their first anniversary, he flew her to Santorini, where an entire cliffside villa was draped in her favorite flowers, jasmine and hibiscus. On their second, he shut down an entire Parisian boutique so she could shop without distraction, then surprised her with a violinist playing her favorite Fela Kuti classic, while he fitted a diamond necklace around her neck. To the outside world, they were the dream, and in many ways they were. Khalid was a man who knew how to love publicly. He held her hand in meetings, kissed her forehead during interviews, and told any camera that cared to listen how lucky he was to have her. "She's my peace in a chaotic world," he once said on live TV, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't just love her, I admire her, I honor her." And Zoey believed him. She felt it in the way he touched her, gentle, intentional, in the way he never let her wake up without breakfast in bed, a handwritten note resting beside the tray, in the way he watched her dance around the kitchen, laughing when she burned toast, but still called her chef of my heart. They had their own language, silly codes and shared glances. She could read his eyes before he spoke, and he always knew when her smile wasn't real. He'd hold her tightly on nights when she cried quietly about her mother, whispering stories to soothe her pain. Stories about a future filled with babies, laughter, and a white mansion overlooking the lagoon. And yet, despite all the grand gestures, it was the quiet moments she loved most. When he traced circles on her palm during long flights, when he washed her hair in the bathtub on lazy Sundays, when he built her a reading nook by the window because she once casually mentioned she liked natural light. "You remember everything I say," she once marveled. "I listen because you matter," he replied, kissing her wrist. To Zoey, Khalid was everything a husband should be: romantic, thoughtful, gentle, and attentive. The kind of man women prayed for. The kind of man who seemed too good to be true. Her peers envied her. Friends who once mocked her modest upbringing now sent her long messages asking for her skincare secrets, her relationship advice, her fashion contacts. She had become the girl everyone wanted to be. And yet, beneath the silk sheets and filtered photos, there were flickers she sometimes ignored. His absences, though rare, were unexplained. The locked drawer in his office she never dared touch. The days he would stare at the ocean for hours, a haunted look in his eyes. Lost in memories she wasn't part of. Still, she chalked it up to pressure, running a billion-dollar empire, carrying family expectations, leading boardrooms full of sharks. She never pried, she trusted. And how could she not? Khalid Danjuma treated her like royalty. He never raised his voice, never left her wondering. He loved out loud, bought her roses in dozens, and made sure every magazine cover reminded the world that she was his. He had once told a journalist, "Even if I lose everything, I won't lose her. She's not just my wife, she's my miracle." Zoe blushed when she saw the quote on a billboard during their trip to Dubai. Her husband, so poetic, so public about his love, wasn't just performing. He meant it. He had to. So she ignored the quiet voice inside her that sometimes whispered, "Why you? Why did a man like him, raised among royalty, polished by Ivy League schools, surrounded by glamorous women, choose her, the shy waitress turned accountant, whose biggest dream was to open a children's foundation? Why did he fall so hard, so fast?" But every time that question rose in her mind, he would silence it with kisses and devotion, and another reason to believe she was the center of his world. And so, for 3 golden years, Zoe Obika Danjuma lived in what felt like a modern fairy tale. Her every dream had come true: love, wealth, visibility, and a man who made the world believe she was the luckiest woman alive. Until the day it all unraveled. But that day hadn't come yet. For now, as she lay in his arms on their anniversary night, diamond earrings sparkling beneath silk sheets and her head resting on his chest, she whispered, "I still can't believe you chose me." Khalid's arms tightened around her. He kissed the top of her head and whispered back, "You have no idea how lucky I am." And in the dark, as she drifted off to sleep, Zoe never noticed the hesitation in his breath, the secret that sat on the tip of his tongue, waiting to be revealed. It started as a whisper, a quiet hum of unease in the pit of Zoe's stomach. Nothing concrete, nothing she could point to and say, "That's it." But it lingered like a shadow in a sunlit room. Khalid was still the perfect husband. He kissed her forehead before work, made her laugh over dinner, and left love notes tucked into her handbags. But beneath the rhythm of their beautiful life, Zoe began to feel watched, not by cameras or people, but by her own growing suspicion. It began the morning he fainted in the shower. She had woken to the crash of glass and the sickening thud of someone, falling hard. Her heart jumped as she rushed into the marble-tiled bathroom, finding Khalid on the floor, pale and disoriented, water still running over his face. "Khalid!" she screamed, kneeling beside him, her robe soaking through. "What happened? Are you hurt?" He blinked slowly, sat up and waved her off with a weak smile. "Just slipped." "I'm fine, Zoe. Don't panic." But his skin was clammy, his pupils dilated, and for the first time his strength looked like an illusion. She wanted to call the doctor. He refused. "I'm fine, love. Please, let's not make this a thing," he said, pulling her close and burying his face in her shoulder. She didn't push it. Maybe she should have. That week she noticed he began taking pills in secret, tiny white tablets he swallowed before bed when he thought she was asleep. She once asked about them casually, and he deflected with a smile. "Just vitamins. You know how these nutritionists are." She wanted to believe him, but the whisper got louder. The next sign came during a gala dinner at the Echo Hotel. Khalid had just delivered a powerful speech on youth entrepreneurship, dazzling the crowd with his charm. But when he returned to their table, his smile faltered for just a second, barely noticeable. But Zoe caught it. "You okay?" she asked under her breath, slipping her hand into his. He nodded. "Just a slight headache. These lights are killing me." But he avoided wine, ate only soup, and when they returned home, he went straight to bed without their usual end-of-night rituals. No midnight chats, no cuddling, just silence. Zoe tried to shake the worry. Maybe he was overworking himself. Maybe it was stress. But something had shifted. Working in her, it wasn't that Khalid stopped loving her. If anything, he became even more affectionate, more present, more gentle. He planned surprise dates, brought her favorite pastries from the island, bought her an easel after she casually mentioned missing her high school art class. But with every kind gesture, she felt him apologizing for something she didn't understand. One afternoon, while rearranging his closet, she found a drawer slightly ajar. Inside was a black, leather-bound notebook and a stack of old medical reports sealed in a brown envelope. Her fingers hovered over the journal. She didn't open it. Instead, she confronted him that evening as he worked in his home office. "Khalid, are you sick?" His hands paused on the keyboard. He looked up slowly. "What?" "I found pills in a drawer with medical papers." She stepped closer. "Don't lie to me." He smiled, soft and tired. "Zoey, I'm not dying, if that's what you're afraid of. I just had some tests run last year, kidney-related. But I'm fine now." "Kidney," she repeated. "When did this start?" "Before we met," he said quickly. Too quickly. Her brows furrowed. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" He stood, walked to her, and cupped her face. "Because I didn't want you to worry. I wanted our life to be untouched. Perfect. And it is, isn't it?" His touch was warm. His words were gentle. But Zoey felt cold. That night, she stared at him as he slept beside her. Perfect. Peaceful. But the whisper in her gut had become a murmur. She began to notice more. The way he excused himself to the rooftop terrace for private calls. The way his driver, her father's old colleague, sometimes looked at her with guilt behind his eyes. The way her father, once so proud of her marriage, now avoided eye contact during family dinners. The puzzle was forming. Slowly. One evening, while her father visited for tea, she asked him directly. "Daddy," she said, setting down her cup, "did you ever talk to Khalid about me before we met?" He froze. "Talk to him how?" "I don't know. Just anything. When you worked for him?" Her father chuckled nervously. "I mean, yes, we talked a lot. He was always kind. He paid for your mother's surgery attempt, remember?" "I remember." Silence stretched between them. "I just find it strange," she said, trying to keep her voice even. "How quickly he wanted to marry me. How intensely." Her father looked away. "Zoey, some things are better left alone. He loves you. That's all that matters." But that wasn't enough. Not anymore. Later that week, she finally opened the drawer. Not the journal. Not yet. But the envelope. Inside were lab results, hospital letters. Her own name listed as a kidney donor match. Dated years before she had ever laid eyes on Khalid Danjuma. Her hand trembled. Her breath hitched. She sat on the edge of the bed, papers scattered like fallen leaves, and stared at the names stamped on the top corner of every sheet. Danjuma, Khalid stage 4, rare nephropathy donor search ongoing. The date of that report was 6 months before their first meeting. The whisper was no longer a whisper. It had become a scream. The house was too quiet. Zoey stood in the center of their bedroom, her fingers still curled around the worn black journal. The same one she had seen so many times in Khalid's drawer. Always closed, always locked, always avoided. But now the lock was broken. Whether by accident or by design, she didn't know. But the thin gold latch had snapped easily under pressure, and the cover opened like a wound, revealing pages soaked in ink, pain, and pieces of a man she had never truly known. She took a deep breath and sat on the edge of their bed. Her knees trembled. Her pulse roared in her ears. And then she began to read. Entry 1. 2 years before our wedding. I've waited too long. The new report confirms it. Without a transplant, I won't live past 35. The meds are barely holding things together now. They say I need a living donor, someone rare, someone willing. But I don't have time or hope. The list is too long. Zoey paused. Her stomach clenched. The handwriting was unmistakably Khalid's. Sharp but clean. Bold. Just like him. She flipped to the next entry. Entry 4. 14 months before our wedding. It's strange how life works. I ran into Mr. Obika today, my old driver. He looks older, tired. But we talked. I told him everything. I needed someone to hear me. I didn't expect what he said next. He told me about his daughter, about how she once offered her kidney to save her mother. But it was too late. Her mother didn't survive. But the medical files, they match. Her blood type, her tissue markers. She could save me. Zoey felt her throat tighten. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. He knew. He knew from the beginning. Entry 6. 11 months before our wedding, I saw her today for the first time since she was a teenager. Zoey. She works at a finance firm in Lecky now. Smart, quiet, still has that same soft laugh. Her eyes don't know the weight they carry. I watched her from across the restaurant where she had lunch with her coworkers. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid to hope. I want her to fall for me, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but so deeply that when the time comes, she'll offer her kidney willingly, without knowing. Zoey slammed the journal shut. Her chest heaved as the room spun. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Was that it? Was that all she had ever been to him? A match, a donor, a cure. Not a wife, not a partner, just a ticking solution dressed in romance and affection. She stood up, paced, tried to steady her racing thoughts. Her heart felt like it was being ripped apart thread by thread, and yet curiosity pulled her back. A sick part of her needed to finish. She turned to the final entries. They were different, scribbled in a hurry, some pages tear-streaked and smudged. Entry 12. 5 weeks before the transplant. She's more than I imagined. God, she's more. I thought I could play this game. I thought I could woo her, win her, and when the time came, ask for her help. But now I hate myself for even thinking that way. I love her. I truly love her. Her joy, her strength, her silly jokes, her kindness, the way she makes the house feel like home. I can't ask her. I won't. If I die, I die, but I'll do it loving her, not using her. Entry 14. The day after the donor call, miracle, a donor came through, not from her, from the list, out of nowhere. She still doesn't know I was sick. She doesn't know any of it. I wanted to tell her after the surgery, but every time I see her smile, I lose my voice. If she ever finds this journal, I pray she sees the whole of it, the change, the regret, the truth. I did plan to use her, but I never did. And now, I love her more than I thought I could love anyone. The journal slipped from Zoey's hands and hit the carpet with a dull thud. She stood frozen in place, staring at nothing. The silence around her buzzed with betrayal, love, grief, confusion. Khalid, the man who had adored her, who had shown her off to the world, who had kissed her in front of flashing lights and whispered poetry into her skin. He had once planned to use her, but he hadn't gone through with it. Still, the lie had happened. The manipulation had begun, and whether or not he changed his mind later didn't erase the truth of how it started. She didn't know how long she stood there. Minutes, hours, it didn't matter. Time had splintered the moment she opened that journal. Eventually, she heard the soft sound of the front door. Khalid. She didn't move. He walked in whistling gently, carrying a white box of pastries from her favorite bakery, her usual vanilla croissants with strawberry cream. He placed them on the kitchen counter and called out, "Zoey, baby, you home?" No answer. He walked into the bedroom and froze. She was standing in the center of the room. The journal lay at her feet. Their eyes met. His smile fell. "Zoey," he said softly, "you read it." Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice was steel. "You married me to save your life." He didn't speak at first, just stared at her with a pain that almost matched hers. "Yes," he finally whispered, "that was the plan. But it's not why I stayed. It's not why I love you now." She took a step back. He stepped forward. "I changed, Zoey. I swear it. You changed me. But you started with a lie." "I know. And you let me fall in love with someone who had a hidden agenda." He swallowed, and then I fell harder than I ever expected. Her hands balled into fists. "You were going to let me give you my kidney without knowing the truth?" "I never asked," he said gently. "I couldn't. I was going to die loving you, not using you." Silence. Then she turned away. I need time, she said hoarsely. I'll wait, he replied, for as long as it takes. As the bedroom door clicked softly behind her, Khalid Danjuma sat on their bed, eyes on the journal, heart heavy. And for the first time in his life, he feared he had lost everything. Zoey didn't leave the house. Not physically, at least, but emotionally, she was gone. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, silent, graceful, unreachable. She ate at different times, slept in the guest room, avoided his touch, spoke only when necessary. And when Khalid looked at her, he could see it. The light had dimmed. The trust had cracked. He didn't blame her. How could he? She had every right to leave, every reason to hate him, and yet she stayed. Barely, but she stayed. So one Saturday morning, as sunlight spilled across the marble floor and the world outside their home hummed with weekend ease, Khalid decided to break the silence. He found her in the garden. She was pruning the roses he'd planted for her 3rd birthday as his wife, white petals with soft pink edges, her favorite. Zoey, he said gently, can we talk? She didn't look at him. There's nothing else to say. There's everything to say, he replied. Please. She clipped a final bloom, stood up, and brushed the soil from her hands. Then talk. Khalid nodded. I'll tell you everything. No lies, no rehearsed answers. Just the truth. She crossed her arms and waited. I was diagnosed at 29, he began. I had always been healthy, played polo, swam, lived fast like most sons of rich men. Then I started getting tired all the time. My vision blurred. I couldn't keep food down. They ran tests, and the final report came in, rare nephropathy. My kidneys were failing. He paused, watching her face. Still unreadable. The doctors said I had maybe 6 years, 7 with dialysis and luck. A transplant was my best shot, but I wasn't on the top of any list. My blood type is rare, and tissue compatibility made it even harder. I didn't want to tell anyone, not the press, not my board, not even my mother. Only one person knew at first, your father. Zoey's brow furrowed. One day he visited me after retiring. We had always been close. He was the only father figure I ever really respected. He came to say thank you for paying for your mother's medical bills. My father told you about my mother? She asked. Khalid nodded. Yes, he told me everything. That you were willing to donate a kidney to save her. That you had done all the tests. That she was too far gone when the surgery was scheduled. Zoey's chest rose and fell slowly. I remembered you, Khalid said. I'd seen you once or twice when you were younger. Quiet, always reading, helping your mom. But when your father said you were a match, something shifted in me. I was desperate. And you decided to, what? Seduce me. Her voice shook. Make me fall in love with you so I'd hand over a kidney without even knowing why? He winced. That was the plan. At first. She stepped back. I know how that sounds, he said quickly. It's horrible, twisted. But when people think they're dying, they lose themselves. I convinced myself it wasn't wrong if I loved you, if I gave you a beautiful life, if I didn't ask, just hoped. Tears formed in Zoey's eyes. But that's still manipulation, Khalid. I know, he said quietly, and it kills me, every day. She looked away. But something happened, he continued, something I never expected. I fell in love with you, for real. Not because you were a match, not because I needed something, but because you were you. You were kind and funny. You lit up every room. You weren't impressed by money. You challenged me. You made me laugh again, sleep again, breathe again. He stepped closer, careful not to touch her. And when the doctors called, said they'd found a donor, I cried, not because I was saved, but because I knew I'd never have to ask you. I could just love you without guilt. Zoey's lips trembled. Why didn't you tell me after the transplant? I tried, he whispered, so many times. But every time I looked into your eyes, I froze. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I kept telling myself I'd tell you someday. I even wrote it down in that journal. It was cowardly. I know. There was a long silence. Only the wind stirred the roses. Finally, Zoey spoke. So the love was real, but it started with a lie. Khalid nodded, shame washing over his face. Yes, but it became the only truth that ever mattered to me. Her eyes glistened. I don't even know what's real anymore. You made me feel like the luckiest woman alive. And it turns out I was part of a strategy. He dropped to his knees before her. Not dramatic, just desperate. You weren't a strategy. You were a miracle. You still are. I was supposed to die, Zoey, and then God gave me 2 second chances. One with life and one with you. She turned away, wiping her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. I just needed you to know the full truth. She didn't speak for a while. When she finally did, her voice was softer. I need time, Khalid. I'll give you forever, he said. Zoey walked back inside slowly. Her fingers still smelled of rose stems. Her chest still felt tight. Her heart still ached. But for the first time in days, the anger wasn't as loud. Because now, she finally had the truth. The days that followed were not filled with rage. They were filled with silence. Not the kind that screamed or tore at the walls, but the kind that sat gently in every corner of the mansion. A quiet pause in a life once drenched in public affection and grand romantic gestures. Khalid gave her space. He stopped bringing her breakfast in bed. He no longer waited up at night, hoping she'd curl beside him. He didn't leave notes or flowers. He didn't try to win her back with luxury. He simply waited. And Zoey noticed. She noticed how he now slept in the other room without question, how he still asked the staff to prepare her favorite meals, but never hovered to see if she ate them, how he moved more slowly now, as though carrying the weight of his own shame wherever he went. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was sorrow. And that, more than anything, confused her. If he had been cold, calculating, if he had laughed when she confronted him, or twisted her love into some cruel justification, she could have walked away. Maybe even with peace. But this was the man who had adored her, who still did. One evening, Zoey stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of their living room sipping tea. She watched the rain drape Lagos in soft gray sheets, the city lights blurred like a Monet painting. She wasn't sure when the love and the pain had become so tangled. Her phone buzzed. A message from her sister, Anita. Anita. Just checking in. How's your fairy tale holding up? Zoey stared at the screen. Fairy tale. That's what they'd all called it. She used to love that. Now it made her stomach turn. She typed back slowly. Zoey. Turns out it had a prologue I didn't know about. That Sunday, she found herself outside the chapel Khalid had built inside their compound, a small, private sanctuary with stained glass windows and warm cedar pews. She didn't plan to go there. Her feet just led her. She stepped inside, surprised to find the room already lit by candles. Khalid was there, seated in the front row, head bowed. He didn't notice her until she cleared her throat gently. His head turned slowly. He stood, unsure whether to smile or remain still. Zoey. She walked in quietly and sat a few feet away from him. I didn't know you came in here, she said softly. Only when I need to feel small again, he replied. And lately, that's every day. There was no bitterness in his voice, no drama, just tired honesty. She turned to him. Why didn't you just choose someone else? He looked at her, confused. You're Khalid Danjuma, she continued. You could have had any woman. Why not just find another match? Pay someone. Tell them up front. Why choose me? He exhaled. Because I didn't just want to live. I wanted to live with dignity. At least that's what I told myself. She blinked. I convinced myself that love could justify the beginning, he said. That if I truly loved the woman who saved me, Maybe it wouldn't feel like manipulation. Maybe it would feel like destiny. But it wasn't, she whispered. It was deceit. He nodded. Yes, and that's something I'll carry forever. There was a long pause. She studied him, really looked. He looked thinner, older, less sure. The polished, invincible college she had married now sat in front of her like a man stripped of ego. A man who had loved and lied. A man who had changed. I don't know how to forgive this, she said honestly. I don't expect you to, he replied. But I hope someday you'll let me earn a second chance. Not just as your husband, but as a man who wants to be worthy of you. She wiped a silent tear from her cheek and stood. He remained seated, eyes lowered. Then softly she reached for his hand. I don't know if I still trust you, she said, but I know I still love you. His eyes met hers slowly. And I think that scares me more than anything else. That night, Zoey returned to their shared bedroom. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She pulled the covers back and climbed into bed, lying quietly beside Khalid for the first time in weeks. He turned his head toward her, careful not to move too quickly. Are you sure? He asked. No, she whispered, but I'm willing to try. He said nothing, just reached under the blanket and found her hand. And as they lay in silence side by side, the distance between them finally began to close. Not with words, not with promises, but with presence. Real, raw, undecorated. It wasn't healing yet, but it was a beginning. It started with a whisper, again. Only this time the whisper didn't come from within. It came from outside. From glossy magazine blogs, nosy socialites, and media accounts that lived for scandal. A blurry photo, a vague caption, just enough to make the world turn its gaze toward them again. Is Lagos's golden couple falling apart? Sources say Zoey Danjuma moved into the guest wing. Trouble in billionaire paradise? Zoey stared at the headline as it flashed on her phone screen. She had been up since dawn, sipping weak tea on the veranda, wearing the same white robe she'd been hiding in for days. The robe Khalid had once monogrammed with her initials. The initials that now felt heavy. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was her best friend, Ife. Ife. Tell me it's not true. Did he cheat? Blink twice. Zoey didn't respond. She didn't have the strength to lie. And the truth? It was messier than any affair. More intimate, more devastating. Khalid came out moments later, fully dressed in a crisp, dark caftan. He had a meeting downtown, something about a board decision, but his eyes lingered on her with a quiet apology. They've started, she said without looking up. I know, he replied. You knew they would, didn't you? He hesitated. Yes, but I was hoping we'd be ready when it happened. Nah. Zoey scoffed. No one's ever ready to be humiliated by the world. They don't know the truth, he said gently. They don't need to. They only need a rumor. And right now, I'm the woman who moved out of her billionaire husband's bedroom. The woman everyone thought was living the dream. He knelt beside her chair. Do you want me to issue a statement? She looked down at him. And say what, Khalid? That your wife is just taking a break from being deceived? No, just that we're working through something private. And that'll calm them? It'll protect you. She shook her head. Nothing protects people like me. Not really. Once the world smells blood, they tear you apart. By noon, her mother's sister had called. 2 of her college friends had texted, one asking to come by with wine and stories. One simply wrote, men. She ignored them all. But it wasn't until she walked into the boutique in Lekki, her usual tailor's place, that she realized just how much the whispers had turned into echoes. 3 women seated in the waiting area turned silent when she entered. Their eyes scanned her face, her left hand, her posture. Mrs. Danjuma, the receptionist said too loudly, almost in awe. You look, well? Zoey nodded curtly. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was in a simple bun, and still it felt like everyone was dissecting her. One woman leaned into another and whispered, not softly enough, She looks thinner, probably stress. Rich people don't cry, though. That was it. She walked out before her fitting. Back at the mansion, Khalid was waiting. He stood in the hallway, watching as she dropped her purse on the floor and kicked off her shoes. She didn't cry, but her shoulders sagged under the weight of what it meant to be known and no longer admired. "Zoey," he said, stepping forward, "let me handle this." "No," she said, her voice low. "I'm not hiding. Not anymore." He paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'll do the gala next week. With you." He blinked. "You sure? The foundation gala is going to be crawling with press. Let them look. Let them whisper. Let them wonder." She turned to him. "We never asked them to tell our story, Khalid, so we'll tell it ourselves." He stepped closer. "You don't have to defend me." "I'm not doing it for you," she said. "I'm doing it for me, because I don't want to live my life dodging truth or pity. I want them to know I stood back up." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. The night of the gala arrived too quickly. Their car pulled up to the red carpet outside the Civic Center. Photographers surged forward, flashes bursting like fireworks. "Mr. and Mrs. Danjuma. Zoey, are the rumors true? Is the fairy tale still alive?" Zoey wore a deep emerald gown that clung to her like armor. Her chin was high. Her hand was in Khalid's. And for the first time in weeks, she wasn't hiding behind anyone's narrative. She was rewriting it. Khalid leaned in and whispered, "You don't have to smile." "I'm not smiling," she replied. "I'm surviving." And somehow, as the cameras clicked, she felt the ground beneath her become solid again. Not because the pain had gone, but because she had decided she wouldn't be defined by how it started. She'd be defined by how it ended. And she wasn't done yet. The invitation came the day after the gala. A cream-colored envelope sealed with wax and pressed with the Danjuma family crest. Inside, a simple card in delicate cursive. "Dinner. Just us. Emma Danjuma." Zoey read it 3 times before placing it on the kitchen counter. She didn't need anyone to tell her who Emma Danjuma was. It was Margaret, Khalid's mother. Elegant, reserved, razor-sharp. She was the kind of woman who could cut you with a smile and dress it in diamonds. And though their relationship had always been civil, it had never been close. Margaret had accepted Zoey, but from a distance, always watching, always weighing, as if deciding whether Zoey truly belonged in her world. Now she wanted dinner, alone. Zoey hesitated. She knew this wasn't just a meal. It was a moment, a reckoning. So she said yes. The Danjuma estate in Ikoyi was even more intimidating at night. High gates, tall hedges, security like a fortress. She was greeted by a quiet housekeeper who led her down a hallway lit by gold sconces and the scent of vanilla. Margaret sat at the head of a private dining table set for 2. She wore a dark green caftan and a string of pearls. Her hair was tied back in a sleek chignon. Her eyes, as always, missed nothing. "Zoey," she said, standing to greet her. "You look well." Zoey managed a small nod. "Thank you. You do too." They sat. The food was served by a quiet chef, pepper soup, grilled tilapia, jollof rice with fried plantains, everything tailored to Zoey's taste. Margaret poured wine, then finally spoke. "You read the journal." Zoey blinked. "He told you?" "No," Margaret replied. "But I know my son, and I know what's written in that book. I know the day he started it, and the day he stopped writing in it. The truth has been a ghost in our family for too long." Zoey set her fork down. "Then you knew?" "I knew he was dying," Margaret said calmly. "I did not know at the time that you were the match." Zoey sat still. Margaret's eyes softened slightly. "I suspected, of course, when he proposed to you so quickly, when he changed overnight. My son has always been strategic, Zoey, but never reckless, and yet he risked everything for you. His name, his legacy, his heart." Zoey frowned. "You make it sound romantic." "It wasn't." "No," Margaret said. "It was desperate and deeply human." There was a long pause. "Do you know why I invited you here?" she asked. To justify what he did? Margaret's expression didn't change. No, to tell you a story you never heard. Zoey folded her arms, but stayed silent. Margaret leaned back. When I gave birth to Khalid, the doctors told me he had a small but manageable kidney condition. It flared up occasionally, but never threatened his life. Not until his late 20s. He didn't tell anyone, not even me. And by the time I found out, it was nearly too late. Margaret's voice trembled, just barely. I lost his father when Khalid was 14. He watched him collapse on the floor of our kitchen from heart failure. He saw his mother fall apart trying to hold the family name together. Khalid didn't just grow up fast. He built armor. Cold. Unbreakable. Perfect. She met Zoey's eyes. And then came you. Zoey swallowed. You were different, Margaret continued. I saw it in how he looked at you. You made him warm again. Soft. Foolish. And for a while I hated you for it. Zoey's jaw clenched. I'm not sure how to respond to that. Margaret nodded. I don't expect you to, but I do expect you to understand one thing. She leaned forward. My son was wrong. He broke trust. He built a life on silence. But he also gave you the one thing he's never given anyone. Not me, not his business, not this empire. Zoey's voice cracked. What's that? His vulnerability, Margaret whispered. His undoing. Tears stung Zoey's eyes. She looked away. Margaret stood and walked toward the window. Do you think he could have lived without you? He would have tried, but it wouldn't have been a life. He didn't just need your kidney, Zoey. He needed your light. Zoey looked down at her lap, her heart cracking open just a little more. He made a terrible choice at the start, Margaret added, but he made a better one when he let the lie die and chose to love you for real. Silence filled the room again. Zoey whispered, Do you think we'll survive this? Margaret turned to face her. I think you already are. Later that night, Zoey stood outside the mansion, looking up at the sky. Her chest ached. But for the first time since she opened that journal, she felt steady. Not healed, not sure, but ready. To go back home, to Khalid, to the man who once planned to use her, but ended up loving her instead. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth fighting for. The invitation wasn't grand this time. No glittering envelope, no press release, no show. Just a handwritten note on cream stationery left on Zoey's pillow one quiet Thursday morning. I've booked a weekend for us. No staff, no phones, no pretending. If you come, come as you are. K. There was no address. Only coordinates. She stared at the note for a full minute, then glanced across the bed to where Khalid usually slept. It was empty. He had gone early again, respecting her space, never pushing. She folded the paper slowly, held it to her chest for a moment, then packed a small overnight bag. Behind it, the location turned out to be a private lake house nestled in a quiet village near Badagry. Not the kind of place you'd expect from a man like Khalid Danjuma. No marble, no gold. Just an old colonial bungalow surrounded by palm trees and water, birdsong dancing in the air. Names, he greeted her at the wooden gate, wearing a plain white linen shirt and barefoot on the sand. No suit, no wristwatch, no air of the billionaire. Just Khalid. And for the first time in weeks, Zoey saw him not as the man who lied, but as the man who was trying, really trying to make it right. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either, she replied honestly. He opened the gate slowly and stepped aside. Welcome to where I come to tell the truth. The inside of the lake house was small but charming. Hand-carved furniture, open windows, woven rugs, a soft hum of wind through the trees. On a low table sat 2 wine glasses and a wooden chessboard with all the pieces neatly arranged. Do you play? She asked, raising an eyebrow. I used to, he said, until life got too complicated to think 2 moves ahead. Zoey smiled faintly and took a seat. Sounds about right. They ate dinner on the porch, grilled catfish, mango rice, and steamed vegetables Khalid had somehow learned to prepare. He didn't talk much, He didn't try to fill the silence. He let the air breathe. When the sun dipped below the lake, he turned to her. "Zoey," he began carefully, "I didn't bring you here to beg." She looked at him. "I brought you here so I could stand beside you. No cameras, no wealth, no legacy, and ask for nothing, except honesty, from both of us." Zoe's heart beat loudly in her chest. He leaned forward. "I know I started this with a lie. I know I looked at you like a solution before I saw you as a woman. I will never forgive myself for that." Tears welled in her eyes. He continued, "But you changed me. Loving you made me ashamed of my intentions. It made me human again. And though I never asked for your kidney, I know I asked for something far more fragile. Your trust." He paused. "I broke it, and I can't ask you to pretend I didn't. But if there's even a piece of it left, I want to rebuild. With you." Zoe turned her face away, blinking quickly. "I read every page of that journal 3 times, she said softly. "I hated you after the first. I cried after the second. But by the third, I saw something different." He held his breath. "I saw the man who didn't just love me in public, but the man who stayed when I was quiet, who made toast for me when I was sick, who carried the weight of his own death without letting it poison my life." Khalid's throat moved, but he said nothing. "I don't know if I can go back to what we were," she whispered. "Then let's build something new," he said, "with truth this time." She looked into his eyes. And for the first time since it all shattered, she let herself lean into the memory of love. Not the lie that started it, but the life they built beyond it. She reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently. No vows, no ring renewals, no promises they couldn't yet keep. Just 2 people, sitting in the middle of nowhere, deciding that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing. And tonight, they chose each other. It was the smallest things that began to repair her heart. Not the candlelit dinners or handwritten letters. Not the designer gifts that had once dazzled her into feeling adored. But the quiet, unfiltered acts of life, raw and simple. A freshly folded blanket on the couch when she fell asleep watching movies. A steaming cup of ginger tea on her nightstand every morning, just the way she liked it, with honey and cloves. Khalid waiting silently outside the bathroom with a towel when she took too long crying in the shower. No words, just presence. And slowly it began to stitch something inside her. They didn't rush back into the rhythm of lovers. They moved like strangers who'd once known everything about each other and were now learning again, carefully, gently. One evening she walked into the kitchen to find Khalid chopping onions, his face scrunched up, eyes watery. She leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "You could just ask the chef to do that." "I could," he said, sniffing dramatically, "but I like pretending I'm a struggling husband trying to win back his wife through domestic service." She chuckled. It surprised her. Khalid looked up, blinking through onion tears. "That's the first time you've laughed around me in weeks." "Don't get used to it," she teased. But in that moment, they both knew it meant something. They started walking together in the evenings. Nothing fancy, just laps around their garden, beneath the floodlights, barefoot on the grass. Sometimes in silence, sometimes with Zoe rambling about books or news, and Khalid nodding, asking questions, genuinely listening. One night as they sat on the swing bench by the fountain, she finally asked, "What do you think would have happened if that donor hadn't come through?" He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I think I would have died quietly, without ever asking you for help, without ever telling you why I came into your life." "And you would have been okay with that?" "No," he said, "but I would have protected you from the truth, even at the cost of never hearing you say, 'I love you' again." Zoe turned her head toward him. "You really would have let yourself die?" "I would have rather died than make you feel used," he replied. "That's how much you came to mean to me." The wind rustled the trees. A few petals fell from the bougainvillea nearby. She watched one land gently on his lap. "You know what hurts most?" she whispered. He looked at her. "That I almost missed this version of you. The one that tells the truth. The one that doesn't perform love, but lives it." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry you had to bleed for me to learn how to love properly." She reached over and placed her hand on his knee. "I'm not done healing," she said. "There are days I still wake up angry, but I don't wake up cold anymore." He nodded slowly. "I'll take that." Later that week, Khalid surprised her with something unexpected. Not a necklace, not a trip, but a wall. A blank wall in the hallway between their rooms, freshly painted with black chalkboard paint. "What is this?" she asked. He handed her a white marker pen. "This is our new truth wall. No secrets, no hiding. We write what we feel. When we can't say it out loud, we write it here." She stared at the wall, blank, endless. Then she stepped forward and wrote, "Today I remembered how much I missed laughing with you." He smiled. She handed him the marker. He wrote beneath it, "I promise to make you laugh for the rest of our lives, even if I have to cry in front of onions daily." She laughed again. Real, full. Healing had begun. Not because the past was erased, but because love, when stripped down to its core, had found a way to survive. Zoey stood in front of the mirror, her hands brushing gently through her coils, barefaced, wrapped in a simple white wrapper. The woman who stared back at her wasn't the same girl who'd once twirled in a wedding gown that shimmered like royalty. That girl had been in love with the idea of love, with fairy tales, with being chosen. This woman? She was in love with herself now, with her strength, her scars, her clarity. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and the house was still. Khalid had taken a walk to the chapel, giving her space. He'd become good at that, showing up without overwhelming her. She glanced at the truth wall, now filled with scribbles. "I'm still afraid of losing you again. Today I felt peace. I love you, but I'm still angry sometimes. You're the first man I trust with my silence." Each sentence marked a step in their shared rebuilding, a reminder that they had chosen truth over comfort, process over pretense. But today Zoey had something of her own to add. She uncapped the marker and wrote at the top, "I choose me, and I choose him," with my eyes open this time. That evening, she asked him to meet her in the garden. He came without questions, dressed in a plain caftan, barefoot as always now, when they were home, his billionaire aura stripped down to just being Khalid. She stood under the frangipani tree, the one they'd planted after their first year together. He smiled at her, careful, still waiting to be sure. "I need to say something," Zoey said. He nodded. "Anything." "I stayed," she began, "not because I forgot, or because I convinced myself you didn't lie, but because I remembered something else too." He said nothing, waiting. "I remembered the way you looked at me when I talked about losing my mother. I remembered the way you panicked the night I cried in my sleep, the way you held me like I was breaking, and you were the glue." Her voice softened. "I remembered that even when the love started as a plan, it grew into something real, and painful, and worth saving." Khalid stepped closer, eyes shining. "Zoey," she raised a hand. "I'm not promising forever, Khalid. Not the way we used to." His chest tightened. "I'm promising to stay as long as we both keep showing up with truth. I'm promising to love you, not blindly but bravely, and to keep choosing myself first so I can choose you with a full heart." Tears fell freely down his face. She stepped forward and took his hands. "And I want to renew our vows, not at some hotel, not on a boat, just here, just us." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years. "You still want to be my wife?" he whispered. She smiled, eyes dim. "I want to be myself, as your wife. That's the difference now." And so, under the moonlight, beside the frangipani tree, they spoke vows no one heard but the wind. There were no cameras, no fireworks, no designer gowns. Just two broken people, choosing to heal together. And when Khalid kissed her, Softly, reverently, Zoey finally felt free. Not because she forgot the lie, but because she had forgiven it. Not for him, but for herself. 3 years later, the Danjuma estate was no longer silent. Children's laughter bounced off the marble floors. Toys rolled freely across polished hallways. The truth wall had grown so full of scribbles that they had to repaint it 3 times. Now it extended all the way down the corridor, truth sprawling like vines. Zoey stood in the sunroom, her fingers smoothing the curls of a little girl with big eyes and a fierce scowl. "She took my marker again, Mummy," the girl pouted. Khalid appeared in the doorway, carrying their younger son upside down by the waist. "And he tried to draw on the dog," Khalid added, grinning. The boy giggled wildly, arms flailing in delight. "Drop him, Khalid," Zoey warned playfully, "or I'm writing Daddy as a menace on the truth wall again." "Already did," their daughter muttered, holding up the white marker proudly. They all burst into laughter. The house was alive again, not with pretense but with warmth, with messy mornings and noisy evenings, with spilled cereal, bedtime stories, and love that had survived the worst kind of test. In the living room, beneath a framed photo from their second, smaller vow ceremony, hung a plaque with Zoey's favorite quote: "We built this not from perfection, but from persistence." That was what they had done. They had rebuilt, reclaimed, rerooted. Khalid no longer feared death. His transplant had held strong. His checkups now ended with smiles instead of dread. And more importantly, he had become the man Zoey had always deserved. Honest, present, humble. He sat on the floor with their kids, building towers with blocks. As Zoey stepped outside, the evening breeze lifting her dress slightly, she looked up at the sky. She remembered the girl who had once thought being chosen by a powerful man was the dream. She smiled now, knowing better. The dream was never being chosen. The dream was choosing yourself and building a life with someone who finally learned how to love you right. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.